How's it going, everyone? So, there's an issue going on right now that we feel absolutely necessary to do a public service announcement on, right? Now, it is regarding the switches used on box mods. Now, we're not talking about full-on mechanical switches, and we're not talking about DNA devices or like, other kinds of SX chips and things like that. Things that have the circuit chips in them are its own fail-safe, so it's not about those at all. Before we begin, big shout out to Mass Blast from Plumes of Hazard. Mass Blast has, super smart guy. He has been, one of the first people to point out to the public, right, that but you have to watch his show in order to know what's going on. But he pointed out to the public about how there's a lot of switches out there that people are using that is not safe, and the amp ratings on them are just completely false. Okay, because physically of what an amp switch can handle, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, but the point is that there's certain knowledge that needs to be out there regarding the switches. It's exactly what happened with the batteries. Okay, a lot of misinformation out there of what people believe batteries can and cannot handle, right? A lot of people using batteries on its pulse limits as opposed to its, normal limits, right? And then a lot of labels out there that are, just putting out false specs, right? Saying that these things are 30 amp batteries, these things are 40 amp batteries, where actually they're not true. So the same thing is happening right now in regards to the switches that are out there. A lot of claims of 50, 60, 80 amp switches that just simply do not exist. They simply do not exist at all. Okay, so I'm going to take a step back and let Matt go ahead and explain this to you, all to you guys. But please understand that this is something very important that everybody should know, both as a modder and as a consumer. Because if you are going to go ahead and get yourself into one of these things, then it's good to know what is really going on with the inner workings and if you can and cannot purchase certain mods out there. Okay, so do us a favor, if you believe in our cause, please help pass this video along so that more and more people understand what is going on with the safety and the switches that are in a lot of these custom box mods that's being built.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Matt from the Amp Hour. Unfortunately, this is not going to be a normal Amp Hour episode. This is going to be a PSA. Yeah, right now I'm making a PSA because I feel that this whole unregulated device market just community has gone off the rails, and it has been off the rails for so long that I think someone needs to straighten everyone out so that we're doing these devices safely, so that no one gets hurt, and that's all I care about. I've heard some ridiculous things the last few days, some things that are so incorrect and are so absurd that I think I need to do this PSA to educate you guys a little bit, and hopefully educate some modders out there as well, so everyone's using and making devices that are safe. Now, as you can see, this is the Reddit subreddit OpenPV. If you guys are thinking about becoming modders or are modders right now, I highly suggest utilizing this subreddit. There's people that are multitudes smarter than me on here that can help you out in making great devices, and also help you use devices that you may have questions about. But just to show this problem is not new, this is actually a thread from 4 months ago that the moderator of OpenPV, DarkStar851, had to ban threads talking about people asking, how do I push 30, 40 amps through a switch with no MOSFET, because it was just getting so overwhelming. So this is a big problem. Now, just to clarify, an unregulated device is either a mechanical tube mod that probably you guys are all aware of, There also is mechanical box mods like this Dimitri box mod. These are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about unregulated box mods that are using push button anti-vandal switches, that are using wire, that are not fully mechanical. So let's get right down to it. Let's look at what switches you can get for these devices. So here's DigiKey. This is one of the big vendors out there. I'm on the push button switch section. And as you can see, we can go over the current rating and take a look here. 1 milliamp. Now we're into like 2 amp, 3 amp, 5 amp, 6. So the highest rated switch is 20 amps DC. And obviously, I'm sure some of you guys out there have seen people selling devices with switches that they're claiming are 80 amps, 60 amps, 50 amps, 40 amps. Well, DigiKey doesn't have it, I guess. So let's go check Mouser. Mouser is the other huge vendor for electronic parts. So if we go over the current rating. We're at milliamps. Here's 8 amps. Oh, nope, it ends at 20 amps again. So where are these people getting these 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 amp switches? Let's go on Amazon. Let's take a look. So I looked up 60 amp switch, and as you can see, here's a real 60 amp switch. This Siemens LNF 222R 60 amp 2-pole 240 volt switch. And as you can see, that's about the size of about 20 box mods. That's about the size of 20 1590G Hammond boxes. So if that's a switch that does 60 amps and it's the size of like literally 24 box mods, where are these people getting these 60 amp switches? Well, as you can see, there's a switch down here, momentary button starter switch. That's a little interesting, and we'll get back to it. Now we'll go on eBay. This is the other huge problem. 60 amp switch, and as you can see, here's a switch, 60 amp momentary push button. Oh wow, I got a 60 amp switch, but right below it is a 60 amp switch that's probably the size of 100 of them. Well, how is that possible? Well, the thing is Hong Kong, China, Japan, they know, we're using these switches for box mods and that people want high rated switches, so they're just making up specs. Just like I showed you with batteries, do not trust specs of any of these switches that are on eBay or Amazon. As you can see, a 60 amp switch is a circuit breaker. There's no 60 amp switch that's this big, this big. There's no 60 amp switch that's going to fit in the box mod. It's just not possible. Now, back to that starter switch. Here's a 60 amp push button switch, and I could fit that in a box mod. Thing is, momentary. What is the definition of momentary? And what does starter switch sound like? Well, a switch like this is made to turn a device on and off. It's not made to let's hold down the switch and for 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 seconds. It's made to push down, activate, and close, and that's it. And if you use a switch like this for an application that is going to have continuous current going through it, it's gonna fail, and we'll get into that, how switches fail. Now, the other thing people are doing right now as well, if we just go back over to Amazon and we look up just a regular anti-vandal switch, is that they are doing this weird equation here. So if we find a regular switch, like this is a normal switch for a box mod. Now, a switch like this, let's say that this switch is 2 amps at 120 volts. Well, what these people are doing is they're saying, well, I'm running at 4.2 volts, so let me divide 120 by 4.2 and then get 20 something, and then or whatever, and then multiply the amp rating, and then this switch is 1,000 amps. Well, that's not how it works. Now, just for an analogy for you guys to understand, if let's take a bridge. You have a bridge with cars going over it. Now the bridge, the size of the bridge is the amp rating for the switch. The speed of the cars is the voltage, and the amount of cars is the current. Now, if the bridge only fits 6 cars, will the bridge be able to fit more cars if the cars go slower? No, it'll still only fit 6 cars. Doesn't matter if they're going 80 miles an hour or 20. It's only going to fit 6 cars. That's the same idea of a switch. You can't do that. It's called wizard math. You can't do that. That's not how it works. Now, how do you build a box mod like this safely? Well, use a MOSFET. Here's a MOSFET. This is the most popular. It's an IRL B3034, and it comes in a couple different suffixes after that. It's made by the Internal Rectifier Company, and then this MOSFET is capable of doing 195 amps. So pretty much, if you put a MOSFET like that, this MOSFET is $3. If you put a $3 MOSFET into your box, you can use any switch you want, and your device will be able to handle 200 amps. Now, the only thing is, obviously, there is internal resistance to something like this, to a MOSFET. So when you have resistance and you have current going through, it creates heat. And obviously, this is a small package. It can't take a lot of heat. So some people are saying, well, I don't want to use a MOSFET in my box because I heard it auto fires sometimes. Well, yeah, if you don't put a heat sink or maybe mount it against the aluminum casing of your mod, it could cause the MOSFET to fail because the MOSFET can't dissipate that much heat. I've read that it only can do about 34 amps if you just have the package itself and you have no heat sink or anything. So if you start going above that, you're going to need some type of heat sink or some way to dissipate the heat off the MOSFET, or it will auto fire. But that argument in of itself is ridiculous. Saying I'll just use a switch that's not rated to handle current because a MOSFET can fail. That's like a grenade manufacturer saying, the pins on a grenade could fail, so I'll just give everyone live grenades. I mean, that's an absurd argument, and obviously just use a MOSFET. You also will need a 15K resistor that you'll wire from the first pin to the third pin. But for schematics and stuff like that, I recommend going to OpenPV. There's hundreds and hundreds of schematics to show you how to correctly wire something like this up. I would also recommend put some positive temperature coefficient resettable fuses in. Now these fuses, if you go over a set amount of amperage, they will trip and they will cut off the current. So if you wired these will trip at 24 amps. So if you put 2 of these in parallel, you would have 48 amps that you could trip with. You could put 2 on, if you have a dual battery, you could put 2 on each battery and then wire them together, and then you're looking at 96 amps of current. So I mean, these are definitely a good idea to use as well because it just makes your users safe, and we're talking $1. These are products that are super cheap that will make your devices safe. Now, if we talk about why am I so worried about people not using MOSFETs, what will happen? Well, what's not going to happen is the switch is not going to get hot, and it's not going to fail in a day. It's not going to fail in probably a week. What will happen is the device over time, like 3 months, a couple months, let's just say a couple months, what will happen is the 2 poles on the switch will fuse together. And once they're fused together, it will continuously fire. And that's a problem because if you have 2 batteries in the inside that are continuously being drained, we're talking we could go into thermal runaway. We could be talking big problems there. So just to wrap this up, I'll reiterate, you need a MOSFET for an unregulated device that is not fully mechanical. There is no switch that is readily available that you can put into a box mod that can handle the type of current that a lot of people are putting through these box mods. It doesn't matter how big the switch looks. It doesn't matter what the manufacturer says it does. There is no switch that's readily available that can handle very high current. And really, what does it matter anyway? A MOSFET is $3. It is $3. And it will allow you to handle absurdly high currents as long as it's set up correctly. And really, I mean, I shouldn't even have to be saying this. I mean, you guys should already be looking at master on-off switches, You should already been using the resettable fuses. You should already been looking at maybe like using Zener diodes for low voltage cutoff. I mean, but really right now this industry is so alarming. I got to make sure you guys have it drilled into your head, the bare essentials. You need the MOSFET. You need the MOSFET. Um, Now, I did want to mention I have been giving information like this for a long time, probably 4 or 5 months now. I've been telling modders, consumers, listen, you need a MOSFET. And recently I have realized there are people out there, and pretty surprising, that don't care about safety, that do not care. And that's fine. Everyone should be adults that are using these products. You can all make your own decisions. The only thing I can ask is that you know the risks, and that's what I'm doing. I'm giving you the information so you know the risk. If you are to buy one of these devices without a MOSFET, I would hope you care about safety and you'd want to buy a device that has a MOSFET so you're safe. But all I want to do is divulge information so you have it. So to everyone, be safe, and I hope you'll join me on the next Amp Hour. Take care.